Hello, I hope I'm audible. Um Welcome again and very good afternoon. In some places, might be a good morning still because we have people from Africa, some of our colleagues are from Europe, some attendees are from Southeast Africa. So very good morning, good afternoon, and some places might be good evening. Welcome back to our session of seminars, which we have been conducting from last 3-4 months, and that's the way we thought the best way to utilize the COVID times when most of us are forced to operate from the homes or with the restricted office goings. Today's session is very special. SolarEdge, a company well known in Europe and US, in Southeast Asia and Asia. They are now getting into the Middle East and with a very positive environment and acceptance from Adiva. And I think maybe in a week's time or 2 weeks' time, probably the only company who has been they have submitted for the approval of the products and the products got approved. So I have this session is dedicated to SolarEdge. The topic is very simple: secure your investments with SolarEdge. My colleague Nell, who is going to speak, from a SolarEdge, he is joining us from Germany. He's a person responsible for all the emerging markets, including the Middle East. For them, he has around 35 years of experience in a solar and semiconductor industry, which is, I think, makes him veteran in the industry, makes him the expert who probably might be speaking, talking, drinking, and eating all the time solar. So let's use his experience, let's use his expertise, and let's have the next 40-45 minutes on SolarEdge. SolarEdge is a company started in 2006 and probably one of the one of the fastest growing company with a 1,500 million turnover in hardly 13-14 years. This type of growth with a CAGR 35% is not possible if the products are not speaking on their own. So let's understand those products. Over to Nell. Those who are joining or coming to our session first time, let me introduce myself also to you. I'm LK Verma, Managing Director and founder of Power & Son. We are design and distribution company operating from Middle East, but we have a footprints in more than 30 countries. We work on a very unique model, which is basically a demand aggregation. We collect the demands from the market, especially on a C&I sector. Having those demands, putting it on a piece of paper on a real-time basis, converting them into the monthly or quarterly projections, and then place the orders to the suppliers on a half-yearly basis or on an annual basis. And the benefit of those aggregations has been passed it on to the clients. The advantage in this entire process is that we are able to cut short the project delivery time by 20-25%, because 70% of time, money, and energy is used in making the materials available to the site. We also support the EPCs and installing companies by taking their risks on our head. And when I say this means before the project is awarded, we plan for the material. So this is how it helps. We will explain this maybe in the later part of the event. I'll not take much time, and to Mr. Nell, mic is with you now.
Thank you very much, LK, for giving me this opportunity to present to a pretty bright and broad audience here in these days of COVID. And I look forward to visit you again in person once travel allows. But yeah, as I said, thanks a lot for giving me this opportunity. So to present to the audience really who SolarEdge is, but as you mentioned before, there must be a reason, and there is a reason why SolarEdge made it within 10 years to a 0 to a #1 in this inverter and PV market. So let me share the screen with you, so to share with the audience here slides that I prepared. And so, as I said, let me give you a feel of what SolarEdge is and who we are. There is a reason why SolarEdge developed in such a short period of time of 10 years to become the #1 solar inverter company. And as you can see on the numbers that I share with you on the screen here, you know, we have served more than or almost 20 gigawatt of systems that we shipped worldwide. And these numbers that you see here, they really speak for us. And we look extremely forward to expand these numbers by now also addressing your area. And the area is the Middle East. You can see on this slide, today we are serving more than 33,000 installers across the globe. Okay, we really act in more than 130 countries, and I am not aware of any country name that we are not in, but now also entering into Dubai, into the UAE, and for sure also with the help of our partners like Power and Sun to address the GCC area. What we do is we manufacture also across the globe. So you can see here manufacturing facilities in almost different continents, and also in terms of research, we really rely on the expertise of specific experts, professionals in various countries. So we made it over the last 10 years, and although the company was founded in 2006, we only operated in terms of a volume supplier from year 2010 onwards. So in these last 10 years, as you can see here in this slide, SolarEdge made it to become #1. Now, the question is now to the audience, and I want to explain it. What made us the #1? So in order to look into this one, I think it is really important to reflect again what the importance of an inverter is. Okay, so although the inverter in a PV system is probably less than 10% of the total cost, please let us all remember it is the brain of a PV system. Okay, so sorry to say, but I say a module is a module and is a module or a panel, but an inverter can make an extreme difference in terms of the output of such a PV system. So, and I want to compare our technology against a normal and, let's say, traditional and well-known and well-established inverter technology, which is called a string inverter. And please allow me to use some of these little pictures, because these are pictures where I feel they always keep in the heads and the brains of your customers. So let me explain here again the principle of a string inverter versus what SolarEdge wants and can offer. Let's assume that you have here a bicycle with 4 riders. Okay, so assuming that all of those riders, and let's call them 4 panels, 4 modules, achieve the same 250 watt. What is the result? It is 1000 watt, because everybody performs as the other one in the same string of this bicycle. That's fine, no problem. The moment that one bike rider might turn to be less professional, less performing, what is the effect on all the others in the same string, right? I mean, this is the question that we have to ask ourselves. Now, you can imagine that all the other 3 bikers, they need to reduce because there has to be a synchronization on this bike. So the lowest performing in this bike or in this string of panels defines the rest of the performance. So this is the message that, and the principle that a string inverter works because a string inverter has one MPP tracker, one maximum power point tracker, to survey and control and to optimize all the numbers in the same string. What is the difference with SolarEdge? So here just an expression again. So module mismatch will lead to power losses when you use one single MPP tracker in a string inverter. A SolarEdge can be explained in a similar picture like this. So what if we give each and every bike rider or each and every panel an individual control mechanism? Okay. So in this case, we absolutely have to reflect that there is one bike rider or one module which only performs something like 50 watt. But we allow, based on individual control, and that's what we call module level control, we allow each and every module to perform to its maximum independent of its neighbors in the same string. So, and that's what we are using, and we call this kind of element a power optimizer. So you see the inverter, which is a DC to AC converter, but combined with an MPP tracker, which sits in a hardware unit called power optimizer, linked to a panel. And this gives us definitely a complete different approach than traditional, well-known string inverters. So traditional inverters, we see based on this concept of one MPP tracker for multiple panels, we see different limitations. Limitations are energy loss. You cannot control with one controller a maximum for a wide range of modules. On the same side, you are always limited in design flexibility. Imagine that you use one MPP tracker, one string inverter, and you want to address different orientations of modules, different tilts of modules. It's not possible. Also, in the uneven lengths of strings, it's simply not, let's say, not possible, or it affects the performance. And also, once you sit in front of a string inverter design, you cannot see all the detailed monitoring levels that you see with our solution, which is a power optimizer solution. And on safety, I will address this later on in more detail. So let's look at our, let's say, basic components that we use in our offering. There is still an inverter. The inverter is the DC-AC converter. That's what we see as the centralized piece of our solution. But what we do is we use power optimizers, which we connect one-to-one, one power optimizer per panel, or one power optimizer per two panels. And you can see already on this picture, even we have here, let's call it an east and the south orientation of a string, we can integrate the east and the south orientation of the string into one string. Because, as I mentioned to you and shown to you before, we individually control the panel, and therefore it doesn't matter whether there is one weak and the other is strong. The strong can perform strong and the low can perform low. A key message of this slide here is also, please remember this, we have a standard warranty on our inverters, which is 12 years in your area, in your region. And it's 25 years on our power optimizer units. So let's have here as well an easy sketch, which we always should remember and use when we compare our technology, SolarEdge technology, versus a string inverter technology. You connect in a string inverter, you connect module per module per module. So you are adding up voltage. And after, let's say, 20 of those panels, 18, 20, 21, it depends, you achieve almost 1000 volt, and therefore you have to cut and start a new string and combine it and connect it with your inverter. SolarEdge does it different. So we connect one module, one PV panel, with one power optimizer, which holds one MPPT, one MPP tracker. Or in some other commercial applications, we connect two panels in series with one power optimizer. So this allows a total different strategy and a total different approach than you were used to versus a string inverter. And keep in mind, our inverter has 0 MPP tracker. So the inverter is less complex, less in weight, and therefore longer in warranty than comparing to a string inverter. So again, either one panel or two panels are connected with a power optimizer, and then the power optimizers get connected in series. So let's quickly make a simple example. Let's assume that we have a 100 kilowatt installation. And let us assume that this installation is built with 236 panels of each 425 watt. So, and let's imagine we are using somewhere an inverter in the range of 80 kilowatt. So that's a DC AC ratio of 120%, which is absolutely acceptable. It could even go higher. So this traditional string inverter, I would say in average, just looking at those in the market, gives you approximately 1 up to 6 MPP trackers to control 236 panels in the field. SolarEdge, this is a commercial application, so we take 2 panels with 1 power optimizer. Therefore, we have 118 power optimizer and therefore 118 MPP trackers versus 1 or 6 on the string inverter side. So I assume that this picture already hopefully convinces you that with this more detailed module level power optimization, we can control the system to a much, much higher yield. So out of the same installation of PV panels, we receive a higher energy yield. Now, how does it perform when you have differences in your panels within one string? Let's assume, let's take very simple pictures to keep you, remind you of how the system works. Let's take this little 6 kilowatt installation with a chimney. The chimney will definitely throw a shadow at some point in time during the day on 2 panels. The 2 panels are listed and marked yellow on the little picture on the left-hand side. So in a normal string inverter design, all the other panels in the same string would be affected in that time when you have shading these 2 modules. You can see in our case, using power optimizers, yes, these 2 panels will be affected over a certain period of time, but all the other panels are continuing to maximize the power in that time. So this little example shows you that we would receive in this case something like 12% more yield with the same number of panels, 6 kilowatt installation. Okay, so shading is definitely an impact on panels which you have to work with, and therefore the usage of power optimizer is an advantage. But the question is only shading a so-called mismatch between one and the next panel and the next panel in one string? No. There are many, many more, let's say, mismatch sources that affect a string, and therefore the usage of power optimizers is an advantage. And let me go through some of them. Let's assume here that you have, let's say, an array of PV modules. And let's assume that your wind direction comes from the lower lower part, the lower left bottom of your array. I think you all agree that these lower left modules are definitely cooled in a better way than the upper right. Since panels have a so-called temperature coefficient, there is already a mismatch just by temperature. Okay? So SolarEdge is able to react to this mismatch, and definitely we perform much better on the lower left, the green ones, and yeah, we have to perform a bit lower on the upper right, but the upper right will not affect all the others in the same string. What is another mismatch? Let's assume that you buy today a 250 watt module, and I agree today panels are much higher than this, but what do you purchase? You purchase 250 watt, but the supplier and the manufacturer of modules does a so-called plus sorting. So they will send you panels which are going up to 254, almost 255 watt. So you achieve, or you receive higher wattage modules, but what will you do with it? If you put them in the same string with the string inverter, the string inverter will always look for the lowest in the chain. Whereas in SolarEdge case, all what the panel manufacturer gives you, this plus sorting, can really be utilized in order to maximize your energy yield. So this alone, by nature, by the time being you receive panels, you already have a mismatch, which by the usage of power optimizers, you are able to transfer into a gain for you. Further, let's assume that you have today panels and they are all at whatever it is, 300, 400 watt. What do you expect them to age, or how do you expect them to age over the next 20 years? Do you believe that the 400 watt panel, all of these 400 watt panels will decrease their performance exactly the same over 20 years? No way. So there is sufficient knowledge on how modules age over time. And the aging is definitely, there is a wide variance. That means over time, mismatch of your string panel will even increase. If it's increasing, SolarEdge, again, by the usage of power optimizer, allows to maximize your yield, independent of the different degradation of the panels. So just to give you a simple example of an installation that we have once done, and where we compared a SolarEdge design versus a normal string inverter design. So you can see that even in year one, it's a non-shaded area, so there must be other mismatches. In a non-shaded area, we achieve 2.7% higher yield in year one. And as I just mentioned, that aging will be different over time, and aging will decrease the modules indifferently over time. Your advantage in year 20 is above 5%, more yield from the same installation. And yield specifically is giving you the biggest impact on your return of investment of a system. So here is another example which shows, really, it's a screenshot of a system installed, no shading, there is no trees or something like this, so there must be some other sources of mismatch. And we have discovered, or we have analyzed the yield of those panels over a certain period of time. And look what our monitoring shows, what the total yield of the different inverters, of the different panels resulted. In the lowest case, you see 550 kilowatt hours. In the upper case, you see 650 kilowatt hours from the same panels. It's all 260 watt panels at that time that we used. So you can see, if I would have now used a string inverter, and would have connected all of those in one string, that the weakest at the time would have always impacted stronger possible panels and would have reduced their performance. So it is obvious that by using power optimizers, and this is individual power control, we are able to maximize the energy yield of a system. And what is also shown here is the ability to monitor. Each power optimizer is transmitting the data of the one panel or the two panels which are connected to it, and gives you all the details about the performance of this individual panel. So even if one of these panels will show defect and show a malfunction, you will be immediately informed by a message, for instance, on your iPhone to say panel number 7 in row 4 has not performed well over the last 24 hours. So in terms of maintenance, it gives you tremendous advantage on how to maintain a system and therefore keep your uptime of the system always at a maximum. So higher yield, but also individual module control gives you individual module monitoring. So let us summarize for the time being. So by usage of module level control and monitoring, we have higher yield. We allow more flexible design. And this means if you put some in south direction and some in west, please combine them in one string. If you see different tilts of whatever, 30 degrees and 15 degrees, go ahead, put them in the same string. East-west orientation, put them in the same string. Uneven string lengths is not a problem with us because we control individually. And imagine that you have a roof where you have some, let's call them some shadow obstacles. If you use a string inverter, you would not put modules on some semi-shaded areas because they affect the others during that time. In our case, you can utilize the roof space in a much better way. So because you will put panels there, even that you know that 2 hours during the day, they are semi-shaded. Okay. Also, when I compare the balance of system cost, what I mentioned to you before is after, let's say, 20 panels in a normal string inverter design, you have to cut the string because you almost achieve 1000 volts. You are adding voltages. In our case, we are not adding voltages, but we receive a voltage from the panel, and then the power optimizer, which is a DC to DC converter, provides a fixed voltage to our inverter. And therefore, this kind of design allows to build twice as long strings than a string inverter would allow. So let's say if you have 20 panels per string on a string inverter, we can do 40 panels per string in our design, which means you have half of the cost of cable returns and therefore reduce your balance of system cost. Now, as I mentioned to you before, the monitoring also allows you to always have a detailed understanding of how your system performs, which means I really guide you to say, go exactly, or you sit in your office and you see the panels, how they perform, and you know exactly which panel is effective. And then you send your service engineer on site to say, please fix it there. Now, another key point is safety. And this is something that we really have to look into more detail. So the first statement, remote monitoring instead of diagnostic work at dangerous heights. As I just mentioned, first, when you see that there is something malfunctioning with your system, you are sitting in your office and you determine in your office first, where is the problem? Okay, don't go on roof, don't go on site. First look on the monitoring And the monitoring is simple. We just connect the inverter with the internet, and this allows us to see the monitoring in detail. And it doesn't cost you anything, this monitoring extra feature. It is for free. Now, let's assume that you are building now a system with, and I jump to the next page, with a couple of panels with a string inverter. Okay, after 18, 20 panels, you have to stop because you will achieve 1000 volt. Okay, in our case, we also operate in a normal environment at 750 volt fixed voltage. Now, what happens if you would have this kind of installation on your nice villa or on your manufacturing facility? Let's assume that you have a fire issue not related to PV, but in your kitchen of your villa. You will call the firefighters. Firefighters will come and they will switch off AC in the case of string inverter and in case of SolarEdge technology. So AC, the power supply is switched off. But what happens here? The 1000 volt, almost 1000 volt on the string inverter will remain on the DC side because the sun continues to shine and each of the PV panels continues to produce, let's say 40 volt. 40 times 220 panels, 800 volt. So you are not able to switch this off, which means on all your DC cables, you still carry 800 or 1000 volt. And this is something where no firefighter and no service person is, let's say, enabled to touch a defective cable. No way. In our case, what happens if the same AC connection is cut off? The 40 volt coming from the panel is still there. The sun is there, so the 40 volt is in. 40 volt goes into power optimizer, but the power optimizer says, my master, the inverter, is not requiring me to give you any voltage. So the 40 volt in is cut to a 1 volt DC safe voltage out. Now we are combining 1 volt in series, but maximum 50, which means the DC cables will not carry more than 50 volt. And 50 volt, you can touch, you can spray water on it as a firefighter, no problem. And this safety topic has become really, really, really a key topic. And that's why in the United States, a rule was implemented called rapid shutdown, RSD. Another one in Germany was implemented called VDE 2100-712. And it says, after 15 seconds, when you switched off AC, your power supply, you must ensure that no human being can touch a DC cable which carries more than 120 volt. This is automatically achieved when using SolarEdge technology and our power optimizer. So let me go back. So this is what we call safe DC. Yeah, so the automatic shutdown when the inverter AC is cut off, the inverter says, I don't need any voltage coming in. And that's why the power optimizer automatically shuts it down to 1 volt. And I marked here the RSD and the VDE in Germany, those rules which are effective now in some of these, let's say, strong PV markets, because we have seen incidents where safety is really an issue. Imagine that you have a carport built with PV panels. Yeah, it's nicely shaded and gives you a better temperature for the cars parked underneath. And now let's assume that there is an incident and you should have and you must have to fight the fire for one other reason. A firefighter probably would not be more of a distance than 2 meters away from these panels. He could never ever fight a fire by throwing water onto these panels because the DC cables might be defective and the string inverter would still maintain 1000 volt of these DC cables. SolarEdge, instead, by using a power optimizer, is automatically switching it down to less than 50 volt. So this safety topic became a main topic for PV installations. Another one is the arc detection. So if you assume, or if you imagine that a DC cable is somehow defective, and plus and minus might get close to each other or might close to touch. In this case, an arc starts to build. If an arc stands longer, it could be the cause of a fire. Automatically, SolarEdge detects an arc according to UL 1699B. So that's another advantage, which means if there is something going bad with the DC cabling and the DC cable connections, SolarEdge would discover this arc and automatically would also shut down the system. So these safety features also brought us a lot of attention and a lot of business by using the power optimizers. Now, therefore, in summary, we have higher yield. We definitely have a much easier and more flexible design. We have reduced balance of system cost. We lower the operating and maintenance cost because you don't have to send people on site to measure and find out the root cause of a problem. No, you will get this information on your laptop, on your iPhone, whatever it is, and get detailed information where the failure is located. Higher safety, as we just said, and warranties. I mentioned it at the very beginning. There is a 12-year warranty on our inverter, and there is a 25-year warranty on our power optimizer. And even the 12 years of the inverter can be extended to 20 years at very, very low cost, extra cost. So let's look at our products that we are offering. Today, DEVA already approved the first 3 of our products, which are addressing mainly the commercial and industrial market. So these are a 27.6K inverter, a 55 kilowatt inverter, and an 82.8 kilowatt inverter. So using these inverters, and remember, these inverters do not have any MPP tracker, but now we are using the power optimizer in combination with the inverters. And these could be the P850. So the name itself explains that it can go up to 850 by combining 2 panels. So typically 425 could be a bit higher. The P950 could combine again 2 panels, going up to 475 or even slightly higher. Or use one power optimizer with 1 panel and use the P500. So with all these products, we are immediately positioned to address the C&I market in the UAE and in your broader area. But I would like to give you a few on other products that we have in our portfolio, so to see which other products might fit your region in the best way. So from the very smallest, we have 1.5 and 2 kilowatt inverter, which connects with the power optimizer hardware, which has in one unit 4 MPPTs and allows to connect 4 up to 8 panels. So there is one input for 2 panels with 1 MPPT. The next is 3 to 6 kilowatt one-phase inverters, and these typically connect with 1 power optimizer with 1 panel. Then there is 3-phase inverters, smaller 3-phase, 4 to 12 kilowatt, same, 1 panel, 1 power optimizer. The next range is a 5 to 10 kilowatt 3-phase inverter, and they are special because they do allow to connect a 48 volt battery from BYD or LG Chem. And this means that when you are not utilizing your power that you produce during the day, you can shift it into a battery, storage into a battery, and use this stored energy during a time when the sun might have set already. And then there is a last segment of a single phase inverters. And this is an inverter which combines with an EV charger. So that's a very specific environment. So if you have an electric vehicle and want to charge it, during the day, this inverter generates, let's say, power and allows to charge your EV car at 16 ampere. At the same time, in parallel, you can use 16 ampere coming from the grid. So these two combined together allows you to charge your car twice as fast as you would only charge it through a wall box by the grid. So please look at those other product segments and feedback to LK what you see as other markets, and we can discuss further. Now, always a question in terms of support. So as we enter into UAE and into your area, I think support is very, very important to describe. Now, very often I get the question, how many service people do you have on site or in the country? Look, if I give you the answer like this, we have probably hundreds of service people, and all of those hundreds of service people can look at your system via monitoring. So when you have an issue with your system, you open a ticket, a service ticket with SolarEdge. Now, one of our hundreds of service people can look at your system and will look at your system and will immediately determine what the issue is, how to fix it, and whether it's our problem to solve it. If it's our problem, we will release immediately on the spot an RMA, return merchandise authorization, and therefore this gives you immediately the allowance to exchange the product by a replacement product. So in our case, we cannot delay a decision that it's our fault. No, it is obvious, we are transparent. So everybody or any of those service engineers can immediately work on your specific service task. On top, of course, we are training not only Power and Sun team on how to address technical questions, but we also will install trainings with you as EPCs, as players in your markets. Okay, so this as well, and on top we are keeping extra stock in the country, so to serve you better in whatever is needed in order to have us here as a good service provider. So with all that, I think I gave you a first feeling of why SolarEdge is absolutely different to a string inverter design, and why we were able to move SolarEdge as a company to an almost unknown 10 years ago to become the #1 in this world. And I'm looking extremely forward to travel UAE, hopefully soon, but really to start a strong business with Power and Sun, and with all of you who might join here as future customers. And I want to hand it back now to LK.
Thanks, Nell. Thanks for a very informative and detailed, presentation. It's not only me who's saying this. I'm reading the comments and the questions. This has also been mentioned there. Very quick. We are now around 4:15. Normally we keep the session for 1.5 hour maximum, or 1 hour 15 minutes. We have 20-25 questions in the question box. Some are getting added up to this. We will pick one by one.
Sure.
There is also a hand sign in your screens. We can also take some live questions. Once the question is, once we see a hand in against your name, we will give you the mic commands, and then you can ask the questions directly.
Sure.
Now, one of the questions which has been asked by Mr. Zuhair Abad Ajawad, he says that the DC to DC converter optimizers, then we have the inverter. So, I mean, his basic question is, don't you think that this will increase the losses? So, optimizer inverters together, will it increase the losses?
Okay, good question. But if you look at our data sheets and you compare, let's say, the efficiency, our inverters perform at a higher efficiency than standard traditional string inverters. And therefore, the combination then with the power optimizer is not making it a loss, but rather a win overall in the efficiency.
Good. Again, from Mr. Zubair only, he's asking that more items, more problems. Would you like to comment on this as well?
Absolutely. So more hardware, more problems, or more units, more problems. A valid question, but let me answer it like this. First of all, our power optimizer, as I mentioned to you before, has a 25 years warranty. So it was from the beginning, it was a clear message and a clear address. We have to produce power optimizer extremely stable. Okay, that's why we decided to manufacture these power optimizer with fully automated assembly lines. So there is no human being touching the building process of a power optimizer. That's why the result is, and that's something we can give for sure, is a 25 years warranty on the power optimizer. The reason why we can give 12 years warranty on an inverter is simple, as I mentioned before as well. There are less components inside, it's less complex, it has less weight. I give you an example. I remember our 17K inverter weighs approximately, I think, 30 kilograms. The same 17K from a string inverter supplier weighs 60 kilograms. So it tells you that we have really taken care of this concern. Once we have installed the power optimizer, let's say on the roof, we do not want to touch it anymore over the next 25 years. And the same kind of, let's say, design requirements were implemented as you want to see them from a panel. Put them on the roof and don't touch them again over the next years.
So, so actually, basically, the answer is that you have a 12 years and 25 years of warranty. So even if the components are more, but still your operational cost and your maintenance cost will reduce a lot.
Yes, absolutely. And again, I think if we would have seen problems by adding more units, which was the concern raised, I tell you, we would not have been developing to the #1 in this world. So I gave you the numbers of power optimizer installed on slide 1, and on slide 1, and the number of inverters that we installed since we established the company. And this also speaks for itself. 58 million power optimizers that we shipped, and 2.4 millions of inverters that we shipped, and they all perform well.
Excellent. Thanks, Mr. Nell. Now I would like to take another question from Mr. Isa Ali. He's talking about a cost, putting optimizers and inverters together. Don't you think it will increase the cost of the overall system? Or one is the down cost when you buy the equipment, and second is the running cost after the 5 years or 10 years. So can you just explain and elaborate a little bit on this?
So absolutely correct. The initial cost of the component is on one hand side the string inverter, and on the other side it is our inverter plus the optimizer. So if you compare component cost level, yes, we are a bit higher expensive than a string inverter. Absolutely correct. But now you have to see what is the total cost over the period of time that you run the PV system. And I am willing to share with you also some of these Excel comparisons that we made. A disadvantage at the beginning on component cost level turns to an advantage on total cost of more than 20%. More than 20% advantage. And I give you some simple reasons why we can turn it this way. A, higher yield. Yield is the main effect on your total return on invest. Second, let's assume that you have to exchange an inverter. Let's assume now, for the benefit of the string inverter, you have to exchange it once over 20 years. The inverter cost of a string inverter is higher than the cost of our inverter, because our inverter, as we said before, is less complex, has no MPP tracker, and so on. Which means that if you have to include exchange of inverter cost in your 20 years of operation, you are reducing this cost by using SolarEdge. Okay. The other one, which also leads to a lower total cost of ownership, is reduced balance of system cost. So we are definitely reducing this cost by halving the cost of cable returns. So in summary, yes, absolutely correct. Our initial cost, when you compare a component, a pure component on day one, we are slightly higher than a string inverter. But at any time, if you do a total cost comparison, we are, I would give you this kind of indication, 20% and more lower in cost for total cost.
Actually, just to add one more point to this, most of the inverters, I mean, the standard warranty is actually for 5 years. So if you
Correct.
add the extended warranty for another 5 years and then compare the cost, it may not be much different. Thanks for the question. There's another question I would like to pick from Mr. Jamil Hassan, and he's asking about DC and AC ratio. What is allowed? What is the maximum DC AC ratio allowed?
Okay, so on the DC AC ratio, we are shooting up to 150%.
So up to 50%, it is permitted.
50%.
And what is the average suggested?
Look, when I do a system layout, I typically do it with something like 120, 125%.
Okay. Mr. Jamil has asked another question, that if one optimizer fails, then does it affect the complete series?
No, it does not. So it's just this one power optimizer then which is not performing, and the others continue to perform individually. Now, you must imagine that we have a certain number of power optimizers in a string, right? We connect the power optimizer in one string. So if one fails, the others have to take the incoming voltage and have to push it up a bit more, because this one power optimizer which failed now is not delivering a resulting voltage for the inverter, which needs a fixed voltage. But there is no impact if one power optimizer or several power optimizers fail, because the others still continue to perform and provide the voltage required from the inverter. No problem.
There is one question similar to this. On the optimizers, how is the safety features from a lightning effects and for weather condition, extreme weather conditions and lightning effects?
No, the whole, let's say, enclosure of the power optimizers are taking care of this one. So there is no specific requirements anymore that you need for your system in terms of this.
The second question is a little tricky. Can SolarEdge optimizers can be used with the other string inverters?
The answer is no. So we are not allowing our power optimizers to be connected with non-SolarEdge inverters. So it is a SolarEdge unique solution, and it only goes with our inverter and with our power optimizer. But also, it does not make any sense, because imagine you are using our power optimizers, and now you are buying a string inverter which has 1 or 6 MPP trackers. What do you want to do with them? I am using my 118 MPP trackers, and why should I buy a very expensive, or let's say more expensive string inverter which has 1 or 6 MPP trackers? A, it doesn't make sense cost-wise. B, no, we are not allowing this.
There are many questions, Mr. Nell, on the monitoring system and how effective it is and what are the features which are available.
What I would suggest is that I have 2 topics that I would like to address in probably a next webinar. So one is monitoring. I really would like to show you that once you are connecting your inverter with the internet, how the monitoring system exactly works like. Okay, so in brief, you are seeing each and every performance of a power optimizer, which means 1 or 2 panels. You are seeing voltage, current, power that these panels perform. You are able to identify, for instance, PID issues, potential induced degradation. Remember, there is sometimes an issue with PV panels that between plus and minus, so between this potential, there is a degradation. That's a failure of the panel. We can identify through monitoring this mechanism and this result. And I tell you, and that's real, we have demonstrated to panel manufacturers by our data through monitoring that they have a problem. And they, based on this data, they were obliged to take back the panels and replace them. But I would like to set up a next webinar where we could address 2 things in more detail. One is monitoring. I would like to show you how this exactly works. And second is, we have our own designer, SolarEdge Designer. This designer is very, very simple to use. It uses the image of a Google map. You are drawing the corners, you draw your roof, and you are simple to design now systems on this roof space. And it is performing as a yield simulation tool, which is at least as good, and we have seen some third-party recommendations where we have seen that we are even more precise than a PVsyst system. So these 2 elements I would like to address probably in the next webinar with your audience.
Thanks. I think we have taken quite a lot of actually questions. Our coordinates are available in the mails what you have received. You are most welcome to send the questions over there also, and we'll be happy to reply. For some requests are also are coming on the presentations, sharing, and the video recording and the audio recordings of the session. Just to inform everyone that both the video, audio recordings, and the presentation will be available on our website in the next 1 or 2 days' time. And someone who would like to download it or wants to go through it again, they can they can do that. Another very important point, as Mr. Nell has said, on the next next webinar, there is a next webinar due probably maybe in a 2nd or a 3rd week of October. But before that, I have a very important announcement also to make to the audience. Power and Sun has started a Solar Academy. We believe the knowledge should be freely shared and made available to the people. For them, it actually matters most. This is a part of our CSR activity, and we are inviting the company, various company speakers one-on-one, and it will be a detailed session for 2 hours, followed by a small questionnaire at the end of the session, and then there will be a certificate issued by the company that that so and so person has attended the event. So this has been rolled out very recently. We will have a discussions with Anil and then come back to you on the dates. This type of detailed technical trainings will be purely on an invitation basis and for a limited seats. So each session will have around 30 seats, not more than that. And we are going to have a session very soon. And the challenge is that we already have a more than 50 to 60 actually registrations. So both this, the training program as well as the webinar date, both will be informed soon through the mails. Thanks again, Nal, for your precious time sharing the details with us. Thanks to SolarEdge. Thanks to all the attendees, because we know, when we started actually organizing the webinars, from various companies, which is normally a 1.5 hour session, and then it is dedicated to one company sometime in last of March. It used to be a one webinar or two webinar, in a month. These days, with so many webinars happening per day in a region, having such a large audience is something shows the interest what you have in the product and on the company. So thanks again for your time and interest, and thanks to the SolarEdge. Thank you once again. See you sometime later. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Bye bye. Looking forward to do good business.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.